Ever been around a person who
last week we ended our 10 o'clock Bible study with the Why I Am a Member of the Church of Christ book. So we're finished with that. And at the, now we will have at the 10 o'clock what we normally do at 9 o'clock, which is the survey to the Old Testament. We will be going through these lesson by lesson, and we will most likely not get through each lesson, each class, but it will follow the same format as our 9 o'clock class. It will just now be at 10 o'clock instead. So we'll have that going forward. So we won't have the extra 9 o'clock classes. We will just have this 10 o'clock, which will be going through this Bible survey. Right now, we're on lesson 9, which is on page 19. Lesson 9. The biblical text is Genesis 37 through Genesis 38. And the biblical stories that is in chapter 9 is the story of Joseph and his brothers. We won't get too far in this lesson, this class, only for the sake of time, but because to give people time to prepare for next week to actually have the questions answered. But we'll just go through some basic things just to get us up to speed. Now, as a quick recap, so far we've looked at the creation from a different perspective. We looked at it from the physical days, the physical things that were created, God's interaction with the physical things that were created, and obviously the story of mankind. We then touched on Cain and Abel and the dynamic between them, the two of them as brothers, as well as their dynamic between their mom and dad, Adam and Eve. We looked at Noah and the flood and the dynamic between Noah and his family and the people around him and their relationship with God or lack thereof. And then we looked at life post-flood, coming out of the flood, as well as which paths the 3 sons of Noah took. One of those sons led to the lineage of a familiar biblical character, which is Abraham, which is lesson 4. We looked at his dynamic as his physical family and the difference between his family structure and other people's family structure. And then we also looked at the dynamic between him and his wife and their desire to have children but not being able to. And then we look at the promise that God had made them of being able to have kids and not only have children, but that the children, the blessing of the children would be innumerable. We wouldn't even be able to count his descendants. Then we looked at in lesson 5, the dynamic between Abraham and his nephew Lot and the life choices that Lot made that led him to where he was, as well as the life choices of Abraham. We then transitioned to Isaac. As an adult, we looked at the potential sacrifice of him by Abraham and looked at how he grew up. And then we looked at his 2 sons and their dynamic between each other, Jacob and Esau, as well as the dynamic between their parents and God. And then last week, we concluded with Jacob and his family, looking at the dynamic of Jacob and Esau as adults with their own families and how they reconciled and how they came together and how God blessed Jacob and those sort of things. We know from last week's class that Jacob had a lot of sons. And in lesson 9, one of those sons is Joseph. We know Joseph and Benjamin were born from Jacob's favorite wife that he loved more than the others. So it will lead to the dynamics between those 2 brothers and their other brother being half brother. Okay, let's look at Genesis chapter 37. Genesis chapter 37. If we could have someone read the first 9 verses, Genesis chapter 37, verses 1 through 9. What does that say? Someone read for us Genesis chapter 37, verses 1 through 9. Anyone? Lamont, you want to read that?
Chapter 9.
Chapter 37.
1 through 9.
Genesis 37, verses 1 through 9.
Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flock. His brothers, the sons of Baal, and the sons of Zalpha, his father wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him with his old age, and he made an ordinate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream. We were buying sheep and gain. We were buying sheep of gain out in the field. When suddenly my shift rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to me." His brother said to him, Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us? And they hated him all the more because of the dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream. He told it to his brothers. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream. And in this dream, the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me."
Okay, let me read verses 11 through 17. And his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind. And his brothers went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers feeding the flock in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." So he said to him, "Here I am." Then he said to him, "Please go and see if it is well with your brother and well with the flock, and bring back word to me." So he sent him out of the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem. Now a certain man found him, and there he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, "What are you seeking?" So he said, "I am seeking my brothers. Please tell me where they are feeding their flocks." And the man said, "They have departed from here, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brother and found them in Dothan. Come on, can you read verses 18 through 24?
So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he could reach them, they plotted to kill him. "Here comes the dreamer," they said to each other. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these presses." And said that in ferocious animal devoured him, and then we'll see what comes of his dreams. When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. "Let's not take his life," he said. "Don't shed any blood. Throw him into the prison here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand." Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornament robe that he was wearing, And then they took him and threw him into the crescent. The crescent was empty. There was no water in it.
Then they sat to eat a meal. Then they lifted their eyes and looked, and there was a company of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels, bearing spices, balm, myrrh, on their way to carry them down to Egypt. So Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother in our flesh." And his brothers listened. The Midianite traders passed by. So the brothers pulled Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. Then Reuben returned to the pit, and indeed Joseph was not to the pit, and he tore his clothes. He returned to his brothers and said, "The lad is no more, and I, where shall I go?" And they took Joseph's tunic, killed the kid of the goats, dipped the tunic in blood. Then they sent the tunic of many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, "We have found it. Do you know whether it is your son's tunic or not?" And he recognized it and said, "It is my son's tunic. A wild beast has devoured him. Without doubt, Joseph is torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put sackcloth on his waist, and mourned for his son many days. All of his sons and all of his daughters arose to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, "For I shall go down into the grave to my son and mourn him." Thus his father wept for many days. Now the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. Okay, let's look for a couple of minutes at some of these questions. The first question is, why was Joseph hated by his brothers? Who would like to speak to that? So why do you think Joseph was hated by his brothers? Based on what we just read.
Because he was his father's favorite.
He was his father's favorite, right? What was one of the reasons the Bible says Joseph was Jacob's favorite? Because his mom, his mother was his favorite wife. That's one reason. And what relation of age did Jacob have Joseph? When he was a young man or an old man? Old, right? Now, that is a big deal in this family's history for a lot of reasons. Go all the way back to Abraham, right? Abraham conceived when he was an old man, right? So this is something that speaks to their family lineage. So it's not a surprise to me that Jacob would feel a different way with Joseph being conceived at an old age opposed to his sons that he conceived when he was a younger, right? So that's kind of like the backdrop dynamic of why his brothers hated him, was because of the dynamic that they experienced with their dad and themselves and their dad and their brother, right? So that dynamic is real. We talked about this a little bit last week, but a lot of times we think that kids don't notice, kids don't see the things that are going on in the home, but kids notice and see everything, right? So the way that Jacob treated his 12 sons and the way he treated Joseph more intently affected the son's relationship with Joseph to the point where they hated him and wanted to kill him. What evidence, if any, do you see in this text of the evils of polygamy? First of all, what is polygamy? What does that mean? Have more than one wife, okay. Just as conceptual, right? Just as thought process, what would be some of the negatives of having more than one wife and having kids from each one of your wives? Based on this text, what are some of the dangers of that? Regardless of what is in the Bible or not, of what the Bible says about it, just from this family structure, what are some of the dangers of living that way?
Somebody's going to be more favorite than the other.
Human nature, right? It's impossible for this man to love both wives equally based on the backdrop of how he met each one of the women and based on the backdrop of how he interacted with one of the women. right? It's human nature, right? Think all the way to Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, talking about serving God and money. He says you either are going to love one and hate the other, or hate one, love the other, right? You can't serve two masters, right? Your heart cannot be divided, right? If you have two jobs, you're not going to give the same level of attention to both jobs equally. If you have two goals, you're not going to be able to give the same level of attention to both goals equally. Same thing with love, right? You can't give two people that you love the same level of attention, because you're either going to neglect one and favor one more, or neglect both of them trying to please both, right? So that's the concept that we have now. Is it significant that the same sort of coat as Jacob gave Joseph was worn by members of the royal family at a later date? Somebody read for me 2 Samuel 13:18. 2 Samuel 13:18. What is this? 2 Samuel 13, verse 18.
May God bless you with
And it reads, and she had a garment of diverse colors upon her, for such robes were the king's daughters, that were virgins of Sarah. Then his servant brought her home and bolted the door after her.
Okay, now in 2 Samuel, right, we have all the way to David's household at this time. Now, jumping ahead, we know from Joseph's dream, he had a dream that his brothers would, it looked like from the way he was explaining his dreams that he was saying his brothers in the future would in fact serve him. Did that happen or did that not happen? That did happen, right? Fast forward in the future, in future lessons, not today, but we understand that Joseph will get sold into slavery in Egypt, and he'll have a hard life, but he'll rise up in the ranks and become the second most important in Israel. Is in Egypt to Pharaoh. There'll be a big famine. People will come. Some of the people that come will be his brothers. His brothers won't recognize him. He recognized them. Long story short, all of his brothers, all of his father's family and livelihood come to Egypt and live in Egypt. And Joseph is the man, right? Everything that they have is only because of Joseph and his relationship to the Pharaoh. 400 years, Israel is in slavery in Egypt. There's an exodus. Moses leads them out through God's divine intervention, and then they go on living their life. They have judges, and they want a king. Their first king is Saul. Saul doesn't turn out to be a good king, so God anoints David as their king, right? That's where we are in 2 Samuel. Now, if you had to have a reference point, if you were the people that were post-slavery, right, after Egypt, if you had to have a reference point, right, would your reference point be Joseph? Who, if it wasn't for Joseph, your family's lineage wouldn't exist? Or would it be something else, right? Think of American history, right? The country that we're in now is on soil where people already live. But when we have historical reference points, we're not referring to those people, right? Because we have no connection to those people. Even if some of those people are in the United States of America's physical history, right? We say the first president is George Washington, right? We start from a point and say, here is what we have based on what these people laid down the foundation. Now, when we read in 2 Samuel, the Bible says that it's custom that the virgin daughters wear such apparel. Why? Why would they be wearing this multicolored tunic up here? Based on what I just said. Say it again. Okay. Status of being a virgin, status of being purity, right? We know Joseph at that time when they grabbed him and they sold him into slavery, he was just an innocent kid. Good. That's a good one. What else? Why else would you think as a reference point? We have a lot of reference points in this country, right? We wear certain things. 4th of July, we wave a flag, we sing certain songs, right? Why? Why do we do those things as reference points opposed to something else?
Working on Facebook, right? So,
right, a memorial to remember what was done, right? We have a lot of things that we do in this country that started at a certain time, right? It's not like the day that independence was declared, they wrote the Star Spangled Banner, made the flag, made the Pledge of Allegiance all in that day. There was reference points where those things started. From then it jump started. Same thing with this, right? Israel, looking back as a nation, would have a lot of pride in Joseph. Joseph was so important that he was important not in just your own country, right? Anybody can be important in your own country. Joseph was important on the entire region of the known world at that time. If it wasn't for him, none of these people, by the time we get to 2 Samuel, would exist. So it's interesting to me that he is sold into slavery and this evil is done against him. But hundreds of years in the future, he is so important that people dress like him, right? A section of society dressed like him as a reference to who he was and what he represented to their country and to their nation. Okay, let's look at 4. Now, this is like question number 4. This is where most kids Sunday school will learn these sort of things. Now, describe Joseph's 2 dreams. What meaning did his father and brothers see in these dreams? Let's look at the first dream. The first dream Kuman read, that was in chapter 37 between verses 1 and 9. Let's just physically describe the dream. What dream did Joseph have? Verses 6 through 8. Verses 6 through 8. What physical dream did he have?
And his sheep rose and stood upright, and then your sheep stood all around and bowed down to my sheep. So in essence, he was saying that he was going to be taking a more superior role over his brothers, and that they would bow down to him.
Good, right? So they had some grain in the field, each brother bind that grain together. And for some reason, Joseph's grain was upright, and the other brother's grain was bowing down to that grain, right? And they said in verse 8, shall you indeed reign over us, or shall you indeed have dominion over us? That was the first dream. What about the second dream, verse 9? What does verse 9 say? What did he dream physically in that second dream?
The sun and the moon, that was about.
Okay, so now we up the ante, right? It's not just about grain. At this time, he said that the sun and the moon and the 11 stars bow down to me, which will represent what? 11 will be his brothers, and what about the sun and the moon? Mother and father, right? So he went from his brothers' possessions bowing down to his possession to the sun, the moon, and 11 stars representing his family circle bowing down to him. And then verse 10 says, so he told it to his father and his brothers. His father rebuked him and said, what? Verse 10, what does Jacob say to him? It was one thing to hear about his brother's possession bowing down to him. Now he's talking about Jacob bowing down to him. So
he's asking, so what is this dream that you dream? Are you saying that your mother and I and your brothers and Jesus come and bow down to the earth?
okay, now at this time, did Joseph know what this dream meant? No, right? Did he make himself dream this? Right? When you dream, whatever nonsense that happened in your day, you go to sleep and you dream all kind of crazy stuff. People chasing you, animals talking, all kind of crazy things, right? He just verbalized his dream, right? He didn't make his dream, or he wasn't trying to imply anything. He was just verbalizing his dream, right? Let's look at question number 7. No, sorry. Question number 5. Trace the course of events by which Joseph was carried into Egypt. Now, after these 2 dreams, right, then what happened? His brothers went off. His father recognized that him and his brothers now had a disconnect. So he had an idea of maybe if you went and checked on your brothers and brought me back the report, maybe that'll start mending the family back together, right? But what happens, Kuman read this, what happens when the brothers see him from a distance? What did they say to him? Look what? In verse 19. Hey, here comes the dreamer boy coming to us, right? Are we going to be bowing down to you? So they plotted to kill him, right? and then make up a story and say some wild beast devoured him. But who intervened? Which brother? Reuben. Now, what's the age of Reuben in relation to the other brothers? Oldest, youngest, middle brother? Those who were in the class last week. Who is Reuben? Oldest brother, right? Now, the oldest brother, just like any oldest sibling, will have a much different dynamic with their parent than other siblings because they were first, right? So he knew the affection that his father had for his brother. So instead of killing, what plan did Reuben persuade them to do instead? Because he was saving his life. This is verses 20 through 22. Hey, let's put him in a hole, right? Like, let's put him in a hole. Let's decide what we're going to do, but let's not kill him, right? But then what happened from there? This is where, like, the story takes a turn.
Judah sold him into slavery.
Say it one more time.
Judah sold him into slavery.
So Judah said to his brothers, what profit are we going to get, right? Everything's going to come down to profit, right? Especially the things that annoy you. What benefit are we going to get doing what we're trying to do to him? Let's not sell him into slavery, and then we have at least some benefit from our labor. Who did they sell him? Who was Judah's suggestion to sell him to? Ishmaelites. Who are the Ishmaelites? Where did they come from? Who? Ishmael. Who's Ishmael? Abraham's first son, right? And who was Ishmael's mom? Sarah? No. Who? Oh, and who was that? Maid servant, right? And then he rose up as a boy. Abraham loved Ishmael, and then Sarah got jealous and said, hey, get rid of these two people. And they cast them out. And what did God say to both of them? That I'll take care of you, right? So much that there's now a nation of people that existed because of them. And of all people to sell Joseph to, whose father's name is Israel, right? Israel represents the promise. Remember, if you go back to Isaac and you go back to Abraham, Jacob and Esau was the dynamic of two kids, right? But when you get to Jacob, Jacob had 12 sons. Now at least it looks like you're starting to get some physical representation of the promise that Abraham's descendants would be innumerable, right? Of all people to sell Joseph to, the Ishmaelites, right? Because the Ishmaelites would know 100% who Jacob was and who Joseph's family was, and would they be loving to them or would they be resentful to them? If you had to guess, resentful. Why? How would they feel? Hey, we had same father, and you stole all our stuff. Because in everyone's culture, everyone knows firstborn is supposed to get everything. That's the Ishmael. So of all people to sell him to, they chose the Ishmaelite. Reuben didn't know what was happening. He came back, and now Reuben is distraught because he knows the evil that they had done. Then they default back to their original lie, which was to what? Fake the death, right? Take the tunic, cover it in goat's blood. Then they brought it back to Jacob, and then they pretend like Jacob was stupid by saying, hey, is this your son's coat or no? I don't know what coat he wears. Maybe you know. Is this his coat or is it not his coat? Jacob sees the coat, and then Jacob concludes that a wild beast had killed him. There's his sons, his daughters try to comfort him, but he won't be comforted, right? That's the backdrop of the story. Now, really quickly before we close, what two reasons are given for selling Joseph rather than killing him?
One said that God's promise to Joseph would come through, because if they had killed him, then the sun and moon and the stars wouldn't have bowed down to Joseph.
So one thing could be divine intervention, right? Because if Joseph died, if they would have killed Joseph, then now where would the continued story be? Even from his dream, right? His dream seemed to be prophetic, right? So that's one divine way. That's an interesting way to look at it, because even though people were functioning inside of their free will didn't overstep God's divine will or plan, right? So that's a good way to look at it. What else? Money, right? When they sold him, this is interesting. How many shekels did they sell him? 20. Where else in the Bible is 20 shekels mentioned? Somewhere else in the New Testament. Who? Oh, Judas sold Jesus for 20 shekels. How ironic. The same amount of money that Jesus was sold to for betrayal, his brother sold, Joseph's brother sold him into slavery. Interesting. And then question 8, in what way might Jacob be used to refute those who appeal to feelings as a defense of their religion? In what way might Jacob be used to refute those who appeal to feelings as a defense of their religion? From what we're just saying, from what we see from Jacob's reaction. That would be our last question. What way might Jacob be used to refute those who appeal to feelings as a defense of their religion? First of all, what does the question mean? What does refute mean? Speak up a little louder. I can't hear you. Say it again. Okay, he didn't want to believe his son was dead. Okay, so was he emotional about that? Okay, did he kill himself? He didn't kill himself, right? Did he have to continue living? Okay, so in what way can we use that as an example for those that use emotion as a defense for their religion?
Religion is not based on your feelings.
Oh, religion is not based on your feelings, right? A religion is based on action, right? Because the Bible says from Jesus' own mouth, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. Love isn't based on feelings, it's based on actions. People in the world think love is based on feelings. Oh, we like the same movies, let's get married. Liking the same movies not going to help you. Oh, we like the same food, let's get married. Liking the same food not going to help you, right? Each person actively deciding to put the other above themselves, that's a marriage. If one of the two people don't at any point stop actively deciding to put the other, the marriage will start to crumble. Doesn't matter how many movies you like, what food you like, you dress the same way. None of those things gonna matter when action is taken away. Same thing with spiritual things, right? Jesus died on the cross for the world. But until people take the action to receive that and keep his commandments in the way that he said, you'll never have that bond or that relationship, right? That's just how things are. Too often people react to things and let their feelings or emotions guide how they interact with God Almighty, and it's not supposed to be that way. We see from the long story, especially from Lance's comment, that even though this physical act was a bad thing, look at the overall benefit that came from it by God being God. But if you only would have reacted in that one moment, and Jacob or any of his family members would have reacted negatively to this heinous act of Joseph being sold and then lied that he died, where would that have left? That's the same thing for us. Too often people do something to us or we experience something negative in life and we take control and turn our path. And God is saying if you would have just kept on your path, even the next day was your blessing, but you decided not to continue and not to act. The same thing we can grasp as an example from this, because this is a physical example that we as human beings can understand, because a good portion of parents would have contemplated killing themselves or doing some sort of harm to the other brothers in this snapshot of their life. But where would the whole story be? Right? Where would the benefit of God being God be if Jacob would have taken things into his own hands, right? That's why feelings, there's no place for feeling in religion, right? Feelings, there's no difference between your feelings and my feelings, right? Opinions are nothing if they're not rooted in facts. So as a church body, under grace, we can't operate under feelings, right? Because I say all the time, if we start talking about feeling, I have a lot of feelings. For me, I'd rather go to church at nighttime because I'm sleepy. I work a lot of hours. I'm going to wake up. So if somebody say, hey, what do you feel? Well, I feel I want to sleep. How come we can't do church at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? And we can eat first. That's how I feel. But what does that have to do with anybody else? That's just my feeling. Somebody may say, oh, I'd rather do church on Saturday because Sunday basketball, football is on. We just, Saturday, we end the week. That way, if you end the week strong, it's like dinner, right? You have your good meal at dinner, then you start the next day. We just talking about feeling. Where is that in the Bible? People are too caught up in their feelings, in their emotions for spiritual things. Take your feelings and throw them in the garbage can, because your feelings no better or different than anybody else sitting next to you. We don't have time to be saying, hey, how you feel? What you feel about it? What you do? How you feel? You feel that way? What you want to do? I say all the time, if that was the case, we won't even decide what we're going to drink at the Lord's table. People will start saying, well, this thing come from a vine. This thing come from a vine. I like apple juice instead. Oh, I like mango juice. We're not talking about feelings. We're talking about facts. If we as a church can get our mind based off of action, off of feelings, it will make the universal church flow much better. If human beings can look at love as action and get off feelings, married people stop fighting. But married people, when they go to counseling, he never does, she never. What about what you do? No, but he don't do. So he don't do why I don't do. You're never going to get nowhere that way, right? Somebody's going to have to start doing, right? Which is action. Action is not feeling. Action is putting your feelings aside and still doing. Do people feel like going to work? Those of us who have a job, you want to go to work tomorrow or no? She's Sister Cindy is shaking your head. You negative 1% of the world. Most people don't want to go to work. If people couldn't go to work, they wouldn't go. That's why people are late and do poor jobs, because they don't really want to be there. But how you feel about your job on Friday every week or every other week when you get direct deposit or a check? Then you're glad you went to work, right? Because you're getting money. It's a big difference. Now you feel like someone paying you, but on Monday you didn't feel like going to work. We can't live a household based off of feelings, right? I can't say, well, I don't feel like going to work. Okay, do you feel like eating? Well, you assume that my stomach is going to start talking. Certain things we just do regardless of how we feel about it. Spiritual things are 100% that way. We do things because Jesus did it for us, right? That's how 1 John says we love, not because we first loved him, but because God gave Jesus as the propitiation for our sins, right? The love offering. That's why we do it. Now, the world don't understand that, because when, and all of us who are in this position, when you're in a Bible study and someone's trying to convince you to be saved, we have to do convincing things. But once you become a Christian, you got to stop with somebody having to convince you. Nobody should have to convince you to come to church if you're a Christian. No one. I don't have to convince you. I don't have to tell you who's leading singing. I don't have to make up anything. Any grievance you have about any group of people, I don't have to meet those things. You should come to worship for the sole fact that Jesus died for you. Doesn't matter anything you have. You could say, hey, you could have valid reason. This person hurt me, this person, okay, this person may have done those things, but you're not going to get to heaven by saying, hey, I never worshiped you and remember what your son did for me because of what Ruby did to me. God going to say, why you was worried about Ruby? The purpose of taking the Lord's Supper is to do what again? What does 1 Corinthians say? To do what? Remember and do what? Collectively, what are we doing based on 1 Corinthians when we take the Lord's Supper? We read it every week. What are we doing? Much more than remembrance. As a collective body, what are we doing to non-members and people who aren't saved when we take the Lord's Supper every week? What does Paul say? Proclaiming his death, body, and resurrection. If you didn't go to church because you were upset at Ruby Ellis, when was the proclaiming? Oh, but I read my Bible. When was the proclaiming? I prayed. I'm asking a specific question. If I said in 1 Corinthians that coming together is to proclaim that Jesus existed until he comes back, and you didn't go because you were mad at Ruby, where is the proclaiming? Oh, but I didn't feel like going.
James chapter.
Did Jesus feel like dying on the cross in the Garden of Gethsemane? What did he say? Oh, this could be out. I would like if we could switch this up. It's a little difficult. I mean, but I'm not going to overstep. But if it could be out this stuff, if it could happen, we're not talking about feelings. If Jesus couldn't get into his feelings, Christians got to stop getting into their feelings. We be in our feelings way too much. Seriously. That is just annoying to me. People in their feelings. People be walking around pouting like little kids. Let little kids be in their feelings, not grown adults, right? Jesus said be like a little kid, but not like that. Because the little kid, if they don't get their way, they pout. Adults are that way too. I'm mad at Jason, so when he preaches today, I'm going to go outside. I'm not going to come in. I'm going to get Jason back. I heard it, Jason. We do that. Be honest. People don't come to church. People don't interact with one another for spiritual things because our feelings are hurt. What about when you hurt somebody's feelings? Never think about that, right? Always looking at what people are doing to you. Open your eyes. God looking for people to get out of their feelings and put their hand on the plow, right? Jacob had no time to get in his feelings because he's a father and a husband. He can't be wallowing, crying all night and day over Joseph because he got other responsibilities. That sounds harsh, but it's true. It's the God honest truth. What you gonna do? You still have a family. You still have a promise that God made to you chapters before, right? Did God say, hey, if something happens to one of your sons, especially your favorite son, don't worry about the promise that we make you. You could go off and live your life, but I'll understand it's gonna be hard for you. No, he didn't say that. He said, hey, you only have this because of what I was promising to your grandfather. Keep up the good work. Keep serving me, and I'll keep blessing you. Bad things gonna happen to everybody. Nobody promised us 100% of the time good things. Sometimes bad things are relationships, right? Some bad things happen to us by friends, by work, people in church, marriage. Okay, pray about those things and allow God to move those things out of your life. But if you give up, there is no reward for you. God's not going to say, man, I understand that was really hard, so I can see why you never went back to church. Because he's going to say, what you went through is nothing compared to Jesus. Why don't you speak? He can say, oh, I was bleeding to death, suffocating to death. Did you bleed to death? No, I didn't. Did you suffocate to death? No. I was just upset because I was mad at Ruby. Well, being mad at Ruby really is in no relation to my son's death. So help us understand why we should feel something for the decision you made in life. That's called the day of judgment. The problem is people don't live their life that way. They let physical things deter them from the grand scheme of things. When we look through this Old Testament survey, that's where we come to as the understanding of all the times where people lost sight of the overall goal because of physical things that happen in their life, which is human nature. We understand that, right? It's hard to see tomorrow when we're going through something today. But as Christians, as Bible students who have a reference, we have to study these things so we change the way we react. It does you no good to have this story in your Bible if tomorrow something happened to you and you never come back to church. What was the point of going to the Bible study and seeing someone who couldn't give up either? It does you no good to hear about the story of Jesus and how he didn't give up and something happened to you and you just run off and get a divorce and leave your kids and start some other life because life gets hard for you. Life is hard for everybody. We have to act different because when we act different, the world will see how we react to things and say, hey, how come you're not getting so upset like the rest of us? How come you're not acting the way the rest of us are acting? Oh, it's because of these spiritual things. Oh, what are spiritual things? Look, and that gives people hope for the world that they live in. That's how important your Christianity is. People be looking for Bible study moments, gospel meeting, evangelism. Nobody gonna experience those things if you at work are the first one to fly off the handle. Nobody wanna come to your gospel meeting If you always getting upset with your coworker, but if you were the peacemaker at your job, people gonna want to know how come you're that way. That's how Christians have to react in the daily things, right? We are always looking for these grand Bible study moments to convert people. People are going to be persuaded to love the Jesus you love by the way you interact on a day-to-day basis. When they grab hold of that, they'll see, hey, Rudy is different. Tony is different. David is different. How come y'all are so different in just basic life things that every other community I know struggle with? But y'all don't struggle with those things. Why? We do struggle, but we give our burdens to Jesus. Now we have a Bible study. But you can have the best Bible study in the world. If you already hurt somebody or mean to somebody or don't display Christ to that person, they are not going to listen to you. Because while you're talking, they're going to remember, hey, this person cussed me out last week. Now they're trying to tell me something about what I should be doing to be saved. Sounds like you need to be saved. That's what we need to grab from these sort of stories is how can we apply it to our daily life, the everyday way we live, right? The everyday moments. How can we react the way God wanted us to react, and in some cases, the opposite of how some biblical characters react. When we look at the Bible that way, then it's much more clear. Okay, any comments or questions? All right, so again, next week we'll continue with this survey. We'll have more books and printouts for everyone for next week. And we'll proceed with that since we finished the Why I Am a Member of the Church of Christ book. So please be on the lookout for that. So we'll be continuing in this lesson for next week, and we will forego having the 9 a.m. classes because we'll be doing these, what we were doing in the 9 a.m. class, which was the survey, each Sunday at 10 a.m. class. Okay, Brother Jason, if you wouldn't mind, if you could close us in a word of prayer.
Lord, as we pray. Holy Father God, we come before your throne this time, Lord, and we thank you for your word, dear Lord, that we are able to rightfully divide this morning, dear Lord. We pray that we were edified through it and that we know better for it, dear Father. We pray that as we go forward, that we continue to remember all the things that we do so that we can impart it to others, dear Father. We ask that you continue to be at our worship service this morning and that we please you in a manner that is acceptable, dear Father. In Jesus' holy name. Amen.
Amen.